I'm going to tell you a very intimate secret about a family trip that turned into something much bigger than that. The day my stepfather and I did something that I'm not proud of, but that made me very funny. I always considered myself a faithful woman, committed to my marriage and my values. But fate had other plans for me, plans that would shake the foundations of everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and desire. My name is Olivia, and this is the story of how 1 month in the Maldives changed my life forever. It all started when my husband, Nathan, decided we needed a vacation. We had been under a lot of stress lately. He had just received a promotion at his job, which meant more responsibilities and less time for us. I, for my part, was feeling more and more lonely and neglected. When Nathan suggested a month in the Maldives, it seemed like a perfect opportunity for us to reconnect. What I didn't expect was that Nathan would decide to invite my stepfather, Marcus, and his mother. "It'll be fun," he said. "Besides, your mum can't travel because of her illness, and Marcus needs a break from taking care of her." I nodded, not knowing that this decision would change the course of our lives. We arrived in the Maldives on a hot July day. The resort was a paradise on earth. Crystal clear waters, white sand, and overwater bungalows that looked like something out of a dream. However, reality soon overcame the fantasy. Nathan, despite being on vacation, spent most of his time glued to his phone or laptop, fielding calls and emails. "Sorry, honey," he kept apologizing. "This project is crucial to the company." I would nod, swallowing my disappointment. Marcus's mother, meanwhile, decided the tropical heat was not to her liking and opted to spend most of her time in the air conditioning in her room, watching TV and ordering room service. So, without realizing it, I started spending more and more time with Marcus. At first, it was just casual walks on the beach or conversations over breakfast, but soon, those moments became the most anticipated part of my days. Marcus was different. In his 50s, he had a vitality and zest for life that contrasted sharply with Nathan's aloofness. He talked to me about his travels, his dreams, his fears, and without realizing it, I began to open up as well. One night, as we were walking along the seashore under a starry sky, Marcus stopped and looked into my eyes. "Olivia," he said in a soft voice, "are you happy?" The question took me by surprise. Was I happy? It had been so long since I had asked myself that question. I don't know," I answered honestly. Marcus took my hand, a gesture that should have alarmed me, but in that moment felt natural, comforting. "Life's too short not to be happy," he murmured. "Ever since your mother got sick, I've realized how fragile everything is. We can't take anything for granted." His words resonated within me, awakening emotions I had kept dormant for a long time. In that moment, in the moonlight, I saw Marcus not as my mother's husband, but as a man. An attractive, understanding, and present man. The next few days were a roller coaster of emotions. Every time Nathan cancelled me to take a work call, I found myself seeking Marcus's company. We explored the island together, swam in crystal clear waters, shared laughter and confidences. One afternoon, while Nathan was on a video conference and Marcus's mother was napping, we decided to explore a remote part of the island. We walked for almost an hour, away from the tourist areas, until we reached a hidden beach surrounded by rocks and vegetation. The place was magical, as if time had stopped. The waves broke gently against the shore, and the sea breeze caressed our faces. Marcus spread a towel on the sand and we sat, gazing at the horizon. "You know, Olivia," Marcus began, his voice barely audible over the sound of the sea. "Ever since we got here, I feel like I'm getting to know you for the first time. It's like you've always been there, but I've never really seen you." His confession made my heart race. "I feel the same way," I admitted, surprised by my own honesty. "With you, I feel heard, valued. It's something I haven't felt in a long time." Marcus moved closer, his hand brushing mine on the sand. "Olivia, I know this is wrong. I know I shouldn't feel what I feel, but I can't help it. These days with you have been the happiest I've had in years." I knew I should stop it, that I should get up and go back to the resort. But I couldn't. Instead, I found myself leaning into him, my body betraying my mind. Our lips met in a kiss that was tentative at first, but quickly became more intense, more desperate. Years of loneliness, of feeling invisible, melted under the heat of that kiss. Marcus's hands roamed my body with an urgency that made me shiver. I knew it was wrong, that I was betraying Nathan, my mother, my own principles. But at that moment, none of that mattered. There was only Marcus and me, and the desire that consumed us. We made love right there, on that deserted beach with the setting sun as the only witness to our betrayal. It was passionate, intense, liberating. When it was all over, we lay in silence, our bodies intertwined, listening to the steady rhythm of the waves. Guilt was not long in coming. As soon as the ecstasy of the moment passed, the reality of what we had done came crashing down on me like a crushing weight. How could I have done this? How could I have betrayed Nathan, my mother? But despite the guilt, despite the remorse, I couldn't help but want more. Marcus had awakened something in me, something I thought was long dead. The next few days were a mixture of guilt and desire. During the day, I acted as if nothing had happened, smiling at Nathan when he showed up for lunch, talking cordially with Marcus's mother. But in the evenings, when everyone retired to their rooms, Marcus and I would sneak off to our secret beach. Every night was a new adventure. We explored our bodies with a passion I had never experienced before. Marcus made me feel wanted, cherished, alive. In his arms, I forgot who I was, forgot my responsibilities and my guilt. But reality was always there, waiting to hit me when I returned to my room and saw Nathan asleep, oblivious to my betrayal. Every morning, I promised myself that this night would be the last, that I would put an end to this madness. But every night, when Marcus looked at me with those desire-filled eyes, all my resolutions vanished. A week before our vacation ended, Nathan announced that his project was finally coming to an end and that he would be able to spend more time with us. I should have rejoiced, but instead, I panicked. How could I act normally in front of him after all he had done? That night, when I met Marcus on our beach, I told him about Nathan's announcement. Maybe this is a sign, I said, my voice shaking. Maybe we should get this over with before someone gets hurt. Marcus looked at me with a mixture of sadness and understanding. Maybe you're right, he admitted. But Olivia, these days with you, they've been the best of my life. I don't want them to end. We kissed desperately that night, knowing our time together was coming to an end. We made love with an intensity that bordered on madness, as if we wanted to engrave every sensation, every touch in our memory. The days that followed were torture. Nathan, true to his word, spent more time with us, taking us on excursions around the island, arranging romantic dinners. I smiled and pretended to be happy, but inside I felt torn. Every time Nathan touched me, I thought of Marcus's hands. Every time he kissed me, I remembered the passionate kisses on the beach. Marcus and I continued to meet in secret, but our encounters were tinged with an anticipatory sadness. We knew that what we had was temporary, a dream from which we would soon have to awaken. The night before our departure, we decided to meet one last time on our beach. Nathan had mentioned that he had one last video conference, so I thought we would have enough time to say goodbye properly. I arrived at the beach first, my heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and sadness. Marcus arrived shortly after, his eyes shining with restrained emotion. We embraced in silence, letting our bodies express what words could not. "I'm going to miss you," I murmured against his chest. "And I you," she replied, her voice hoarse with emotion. "Olivia, I know this can't go on, but I want you to know that these days with you have been the happiest of my life." We kissed then, a long, deep kiss that tasted like goodbye. Marcus's hands roamed my body with familiarity, awakening sensations I had come to associate only with him. Gradually, the clothes fell away, our bodies meeting once more under the starry sky. We were so lost in our passion that we did not hear the approaching footsteps. It wasn't until a voice I knew all too well, broke the silence of the night. Well, what have we here?" My heart stopped. There, just a few feet away from us, stood Nathan. His expression was indecipherable in the gloom, but his voice had a tone I had never heard before. Marcus and I immediately separated, frantically searching for our clothes. Panic swept over me. This was the moment I had feared from the beginning, the moment when everything would fall apart. "Nathan, I stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. To my surprise, Nathan didn't scream. He didn't rage. Instead, he slowly approached me, an enigmatic smile playing on his lips. "You know, I always suspected something like this might happen," he said, his voice strangely calm. "Marcus is a handsome man and I've been rather absent, haven't I?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was Nathan just understanding? "I'm sorry," I managed to finally say. "I never meant for this to happen. Nathan held up a hand, silencing me. "Don't apologize, Olivia. In fact, I think this could be interesting." My mind was spinning. What was going on? Was this some kind of cruel joke? "What do you mean?" asked Marcus, speaking for the first time since Nathan had discovered us. Nathan stepped even closer, his eyes shining with a light I'd never seen in them before. "I mean," he said slowly, "that maybe we could share." My mouth dropped open in shock. Was Nathan suggesting what I thought he was suggesting? "Nathan, I don't understand," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He reached over, stroking my cheek with a tenderness that contrasted with the surreal situation we were in. "Olivia, I love you, and I want you to be happy. If this is what makes you happy, then I want to be a part of it. My story is not over yet. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you." Back to the story. What happened next was like a fever dream. Nathan joined us, his hands exploring my body along with Marcus. What started as a betrayal turned into something completely different, something that defied all labels and conventions. That night, the three of us indulged in unbridled passion. It was strange, exciting, and terrifying at the same time. Nathan's hands intertwined with Marcus's hands on my skin. Their kisses mingled, creating sensations I had never experienced before. When it was all over, the three of us lay on the sand, our bodies intertwined, listening to the sound of the waves. No one spoke, perhaps fearing to break the spell that seemed to have enveloped us. Finally, it was Nathan who broke the silence. This changes things, doesn't it?" he said, his voice barely audible over the murmur of the sea. Marcus nodded slowly. "I suppose it does," he replied. "But what exactly does it mean?" I remained silent, unable to fully process what had just happened. My mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions: guilt, excitement, confusion, love. "It means," Nathan said after a long pause, "that we have a lot to talk about when we get home." The trip home was surreal. On the plane, the three of us acted as if nothing had happened, making small talk about the weather and the memories we took with us from the Maldives. Marcus's mother, oblivious to everything, commented on how much she had enjoyed the air conditioning in her room. Once we were back home, the reality of what had happened began to set in. Nathan, Marcus, and I met privately to discuss what had happened and what it meant for our future. "I can't deny that what happened on the beach was intense," Nathan began, his voice mixed with a combination of nervousness and excitement. "But we have to think about the long-term implications." Marcus nodded, his face serious. "I agree, what happened was extraordinary, but how will this affect our family?" Silent, overwhelmed by the situation. On the one hand, the experience on the beach had been incredibly liberating and passionate. On the other, guilt and confusion clouded judgment. "I propose we take things slowly," Nathan said after a long pause. Maybe we could explore this new dynamic, but in a controlled and consensual way." Nathan's suggestion surprised me. I had never seen him as particularly adventurous in terms of relationships, and here he was, proposing something that defied all social conventions. "Are you sure about this, Nathan?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. I don't want you to do something you're not comfortable with just to please me. Nathan took my hand, his eyes meeting mine. Olivia, I love you, and if this is something that makes you happy, that makes us all happy, then I want to try. Besides, he added with a small smile, I have to admit, the experience on the beach was pretty exciting. Marcus, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke up. If we're going to do this, we need to set clear rules, boundaries, and most of all, we need to be honest with each other at all times. Thus began our new life, a life I never would have imagined possible. We set ground rules. We would always be honest about our feelings. Nothing would happen without everyone's consent. And if at any point someone felt uncomfortable, everything would stop immediately. The first few months were a roller coaster of emotions. There were moments of incredible passion, nights where the three of us would explore new boundaries of pleasure and connection. But there were also moments of doubt, of jealousy, of questions about whether what we were doing was right. Nathan, surprisingly, seemed to adjust well to the new situation. Saying me with Marcus seemed to awaken something in him, a new passion he hadn't seen in years. Our own relationship grew stronger in unexpected ways, rediscovering aspects of each other that we had forgotten. Marcus, meanwhile, struggled with the guilt of being involved with his stepdaughter's wife. Although my mother remained ill and oblivious to the situation, he often expressed remorse. What would she think if she knew? He wondered aloud during our late-night conversations. I, for my part, was in a constant whirlwind of emotions. I loved Nathan, I always had, but what I felt for Marcus was intense and passionate. I wondered if it was possible to love two people at the same time, and if this was sustainable in the long run. As the months passed, our dynamic stabilized. We learned to communicate better, to express our needs and fears openly. We discovered that brutal honesty was essential to make this unconventional relationship work. However, not everything was perfect. There were moments of tension, especially when occasional jealousy would arise. At times, Nathan felt left out when Marcus and I shared memories of our time in the Maldives. Other times, Marcus would express insecurity about his place in our dynamic, fearing he was just an extra in our marriage. A year after our return from the Maldives, we faced our first real crisis. My mother, who had been slowly improving from her illness, expressed a desire to come live with us for a while. Panic set in for all three of us. How could we keep our relationship a secret from her in the house? It was then that we had to make a difficult decision. Did we continue our three-way relationship and risk my mother finding out, or did we end it all? We spent entire nights arguing, crying, hugging each other. The thought of ending what we had was painful, but the possibility of hurting my mother was equally unbearable. Finally, we decided it would be best to pause our unconventional relationship as long as my mother was with us. It was a heartbreaking decision, but we knew it was necessary. The months that followed were difficult. Getting back to a normal dynamic after what we had experienced was a challenge. Nathan and I had to pretend that everything was as it had been, while Marcus acted like the attentive stepfather he had always been. However, the sexual and emotional tension between the three of us was palpable. Furtive glances, accidental brushes, conversations laden with double entendres, all contributed to an atmosphere of repressed desire that threatened to explode at any moment. My mother, oblivious to all this, commented on how wonderful it was to see us all so close. If only she knew the true nature of our togetherness. When my mother finally returned home 3 months later, the three of us were at a crossroads. Were we picking up where we left off? Or was it better to leave things as they were? It was Marcus who finally broke the awkward silence that had settled between us. "I love you both," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "But maybe this was a sign. Maybe we should appreciate what we had and move on." Her words, though painful, resonated with me. I looked at Nathan, searching for his reaction. To my surprise, I saw tears in his eyes. "Part of me wants to move on," Nathan admitted. "These months have been torture. But another part of me wonders if this is sustainable in the long run. What will happen when we grow old? When we have children? How would we explain this to society? I remained silent, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. I loved these two men, each in a unique and special way. The thought of choosing between them or losing them both tore at my insides. Maybe, I finally said, my voice barely a whisper. Maybe we could try one last time. One more night, the three of us together. And then we'll decide. Nathan and Marcus looked at each other, a silent communication passing between them. Finally, they both nodded. That night was intense, passionate, full of raw emotions. We loved each other as if it was the last time, because we knew it probably would be. Every caress, every kiss, every sigh was loaded with a year's worth of memories, of repressed desires, of unexpressed love. When dawn came, the three of us lay in silence, our bodies entwined, our minds processing what had happened and what would come next. I love you both, I finally said, breaking the silence. But I think Marcus is right. Maybe this was beautiful while it lasted, but it's not sustainable. Nathan hugged me tightly, his lips brushing my forehead. I agree, he murmured. But I want you to know, Olivia, that this doesn't change how I feel about you. I love you and I will always love you. Marcus sat up, his eyes bright with held-back tears. I love you too, he said, and I will always treasure what we shared. But I think it's time to return to our original roles. Me as your stepfather, you as husband and wife. And so, with heavy hearts but full of love and gratitude, we brought our year-long affair to an end. The months that followed were difficult, filled with nostalgic glances and memories that threatened to overwhelm us. But little by little, we found a new balance. Nathan and I worked on strengthening our marriage, rediscovering aspects of our relationship that we had forgotten. Marcus focused on caring for my mother, whose health had improved considerably. Today, years after that night in the Maldives that changed everything, I look back with a mixture of nostalgia and gratitude. What we experienced was intense, beautiful, and transformative. It taught us about love, passion, and the limits of the human heart. Did we do the right thing by ending our three-way relationship? Honestly, I still don't know. Part of me will always wonder, what if? But another part, a more mature and wiser part, understands that some experiences are beautiful precisely because they are fleeting. Nathan and I are still together, our love strengthened by the trials we face. Marcus remains an important part of our lives, a dear friend and confidant. And I am a changed woman. A woman who learned that love can take unexpected forms, that passion can defy convention, and that sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of another. So here I am, sharing my story with you. I'm not looking for judgment or approval. I only hope that, by listening to my experience, you may reflect on your own lives, on love and its many forms, on the boundaries we are willing to cross for those we love. And to you, dear viewer, I ask, what would you do in my place?